I used to live in a city that was ranked in the top 10 worst places for Black people to live. So how did I get there, and what made me eventually leave? And more importantly, how can you learn from my errors and judgment to help you discern what locations might be best for your thriving? What I'm about to share will help to guide your thinking as you make those decisions for yourself or for you and your family. Now, you might already know this, but environments really matter. There's a reason we live on Earth and not on Jupiter or Mars. It's because Earth has an environment that is conducive to us being alive on the planet. And you think about wildlife, how some plants you find in one part of the country, but you go to a different country and you don't see those plants, you don't see those animals. And again, that's because even wildlife needs specific environments, specific conditions in order for them to live, in order to meet their basic needs, in order for them to thrive, right? And so we as humans also need that in terms of physical environments. We need oxygen, we need water, but we also need that for our spiritual development. We also need environments that are conducive to our healing and our mental health journeys as well. And when it comes to Black women deciding on where to live, it's not only our mental health and our healing, but also our life aspirations, our life goals, our career trajectory, and what locations really support us thriving in all those areas of our lives. So let's start with the basics. The very first question to ask when scouting a place to live is, how accessible are my basic needs? Now, everyone's basic needs are going to change. Again, Black women are not a monolith, right? But this will include things like access to healthcare, access to healthy food options, access to good schools if you have children or if you're a teacher. For a lot of Black women, this includes having access to Black hair salons or having access to Black hair care professionals that really are suited to serving us and our unique needs as Black women. And if you're like me and you don't have a car, a basic need might be a good transportation infrastructure. And you can think about just the overall cost of living. Now, within this category, I'd like to add some basic form of leisure or entertainment. We don't have to go overboard here, but you at least want a place where you can go for a walk. Some people, you might need a place to ride your horses. Other people, you might at least need a shopping mall or a movie theater. And again, each of you will require different levels of entertainment or different levels and kinds of leisure. So be self-aware, reflect on what your basic needs are, write a list of them, and use that list as the basics, the very bare minimum that a place has to have in order for it to be a significant option or a significant contender as you decide where to relocate. And keep in mind, as we're thinking about spaces that are particularly good for Black women, the political climate does have a lot to do with things like infrastructure and accessibility and the quality of schools. So thinking about what is the political landscape, and am I not only likely to have access to my basic needs, but am I likely to continue having access to those needs in the future, or could they potentially be stripped away from one election to the next? Now, the second question is where we start to get to the fun parts, and that is, what are my lifestyle preferences? Are you a country girl? Are you a city girl? Or do you like sitting pretty in the suburbs? Do you like busy, bustling locations, or do you like quiet, slow paced? Do you want to be surrounded by art and murals and sculptures and performances? Or do you want to be close to nature with lots of greenery and trees and surrounded by hills and lakes and rivers? Or do you want to be basking in the sun on a warm beach with the sound of the ocean waves in the background? Do you want to sit on your porch sipping tea while you gaze at the stars and listen to the sound of cicadas? Or do you want to be dining on a rooftop with your girlfriends as a DJ is spinning in the booth? And maybe you want access to a variety of these options. Maybe you want to be able to access the peace and quiet, but just as easily access the nightlife. So maybe you decide that a place that's sort of in the in-between of a major city and a suburb is just right for you. And when it comes to lifestyle preferences, I definitely think racial and ethnic diversity hugely impacts your lifestyle. Now, some of you might actually want to move this to the basic needs category, but I'm sharing it here because I've seen the impact of living in a mostly white town and what that does for my overall lifestyle, my overall mental health, and just my overall happiness and satisfaction, right? And so finding places that are maybe racially and ethnically diverse, or where you have frequent and regular, easy access to Black culture, to Black owned businesses, to Black history and Black music. One of the huge red flags of the city I lived in the Midwest was that there was no Black radio station at all. And this was surprising because even small towns in Mississippi have Black radio stations, okay? And it wasn't just the lack of R&B music on the radio, because I can subscribe to a streaming app to listen to all the R&B music that my heart could ever want. And a lot of my colleagues and the people around me were so confused as to why I was complaining that there was not a Black radio station. And so it's not just about the music and the entertainment factor. It's about the fact that in that city, Black people literally did not have a channel to broadcast their news. Black people literally did not have a channel to talk about their events, to promote their businesses. Black culture did not have a platform of any sort in that town. And so that's what I realized and knew. I was like, oh, this is not good. This is a flaming red flag. And this issue of racial and ethnic diversity includes things like different cultural foods that you can enjoy within that location, different festivals, and just murals and the imagery. Again, the stark contrast between the city and the Midwest, where every sculpture and building and piece of public art was of Abraham Lincoln, to immediately moving to Harlem, where every mural and piece of public art was reflective of Black, Brown, Indigenous culture and Black American culture, specifically tributes to Harriet Tubman and, Langston Hughes and James Baldwin. And so it was just like whiplash almost, the stark contrast, just even in the built physical environment in terms of one city to the next. What is this in my hair? A third question I would recommend when considering a location for yourself is, what phase of life am I currently in? And would this location suit me through multiple stages of my life? Here's the thing. The answer to that question does not have to be yes. It's totally fine to pick a location that is just suited for your current stage of life, especially if you're someone who's willing to move later on down the road, okay? But if you're at a place where you're looking for your forever home, you're ready to plant some deep roots, you're ready to have that house that becomes a staple in the family that you let your grandchildren inherit, then the answer to that question probably should be yes, right? And so thinking about, what are my current needs, what my future needs might be, and does this place suit both the current and future needs? Again, that answer doesn't have to be yes, especially for people who are willing to move to other locations as their preferences and needs change over time. Specific examples of what I mean by that is, if you're currently single with no kids and you're just looking to date, you might want a very different environment than if you are raising a family. And so maybe school zones, school districts are more important to you now. And if you're someone who's actively building your career, you might prefer one location versus someone who's retired and just wants to, sit on the beach for the rest of their life. So again, thinking about, what is my current phase? What are my future phases likely to be? Because things change, we never know. And would this space, would this place or location be well suited for my lifestyle as it changes and evolves over time? Again, just emphasizing that the answer to that does not have to be yes for everyone. Now, this fourth question is related to, I think, my biggest mistake. And maybe it wasn't a mistake, because I think the 3 years I spent in the Midwest was really important for my own journey and evolution, blah, blah, blah. But the question I'd like you to ask before, signing on the dotted line or booking that plane ticket or renting that U-Haul is, have I heard enough and seen enough about this place to really make a decision? I did not do that. Okay. So I'm just being transparent. I was just so excited, to be honest, that I got a tenure track job at a university. I was like, oh my gosh, I got the coveted tenure track job. Before I even defended my dissertation, I had gotten hired. And that was something that people spend years searching for. And some people don't actually ever find a gig like that. Not that it was, the ideal tenure track job, but that's a conversation for another day. And so because I was moving there for work, I felt like I could take the risk, depending on why you're moving and the circumstances around your moving, you might be able to take on more risks and really just take that leap of faith. And so I thought, well, I'm moving here for work. It's a good milestone, a good stepping stone in my career. And if I don't like it, I can leave later on down the line. And to be honest, the plan was always to leave. I just didn't expect I would leave so soon. I thought I would at least stay maybe 5 or 6 years, and I ended up leaving after only 3. But again, because I was moving there for my job, my only first real tour of the city was from the perspective of going for a job interview. And so a lot of my interactions revolved around the area where I would be working, around the campus, and all of what I was hearing and seeing about the place was from the perspective of people who were trying to actively sell me on the place, right? Like it was their job to sell me, to make me want to live there. They had a lot at stake of me saying yes to that location. And so for you, that might not be the scenario. You might have people actively telling you to stay away from a place. You might have people who are like, don't go there. But consider that, right? Consider the perspective of the people that are feeding you information about a place. And can you look for or seek out alternative perspectives? Can you actively seek out a variety of perceptions from people who have grown up there, who were born in that place, people who are transplants, people from different genders and ethnic backgrounds, right? And just thinking about, have I also seen enough? Because once I actually moved to that town, I saw a lot more of the city. And I think if I had seen that, just the infrastructure and the layout and the level of segregation that was in that city, I might have just had a very different perspective on what that place was really about and what my experience was likely to be living there. And it's good to tour an entire city, even though you won't be living in every part of the city. So even if you don't plan to live in one area of town, I still recommend exploring and driving through that area of town, at least just to give you a bird's eye view of the overall context that you're going to be a part of. I think even just doing a Google search. So going back to how I opened this video about that town being ranked in the top 10 worst places to live, I didn't see that article until I had been living in that city for about 2 months. And had I read that article, had I done a deeper dive just on Google, I might have come across that research sooner. Now, by that point, I had already accepted the job. So I probably would have still ended up moving, but I would have gone there with a different plan. I would have gone there with different energy, really having that full awareness of what I was getting into. Something else I want to say here. I was going on assumptions made about the fact that it was the state capital. It was approximately the size of other cities that I did like and that I would consider moving to. And so based on that limited data, I made a choice. And again, I can't say I regret the choice because I believe my soul, my spirit, like my higher self was like, we're going to put you through this gauntlet so that you grow, develop knowledge, wisdom, and skills, and just blossom more into the person we need you to be. So, I can't say I have any regrets, but just knowing that if you are someone who can't afford a risk ending up in a place that you're ultimately severely unhappy with and you're experiencing lots of racial trauma and interpersonal trauma like I did, then you want to take time to really do a deep, deep dive on the research. Okay, so this 5th question is, of course, one of the most important ones for us as Black women. And I didn't fully understand this perspective until living in and leaving from the Midwest. It's the idea that racism is everywhere, but healing is not. I want to repeat that. Racism is everywhere, healing is not. If I know that I can't escape racism, colorism, and misogyny war, and really just, is there any place on the earth where there's not some element of that? Then what I need to focus on, what I really want to prioritize, is how much opportunity is in that location for me to get healing, for me to recover from those experiences, for me to immerse myself in community, for me to find support, for me to just recharge my battery by being surrounded by Black culture and Black history. That was severely lacking in the Midwest town that I lived in. There was no shortage of racial trauma, racism, colorism, misogynoir, just rampant. But it was severely lacking. There was not nearly enough, not even close to enough opportunities to compensate for that, to correct for that, or to counteract that, right? And so that's really what I started to look for. And again, I noticed that immediate stark contrast moving to Harlem, New York, where there is absolutely racism, there is absolutely colorism, but you know what else there is a lot of? Black affirmation, Black history, Black owned businesses, Black cultural events. You know, it was just so eye-opening for me. It's almost making me emotional to think about the healing I received in that space of being able to just walk down the street and see a building named after a Black woman. That would never happen in Springfield, Illinois, okay? There was a plaque or a street, a quote unquote street named after Gwendolyn Brooks, but it wasn't a street. It was at the back of campus, and it was really about the length of a driveway, right? Meanwhile, the street coming into campus, the big long road that everyone uses to enter campus, was called Ernest Hemingway. And so the way the physical environment just affirms Blackness in so many ways in Harlem was very healing to me after coming from a place like Springfield, Illinois, where the only thing you would see in your physical environment was reminders of Abraham Lincoln. Beyond just Black-owned businesses, having a variety of Black-owned businesses, having Black spaces, Black events, Black parades, again, Black radio stations, there's also the idea of other support systems. And so one thing you might consider, this isn't necessarily the most important thing on my list, but for some of you, being close to family and friends is really necessary for you to support yourself as a Black woman. And when I moved to the Midwest, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have connections or ties at all. And I know that I might have had a completely different experience if I already had close friends and family close by and in the area. And even if I was still having those negative experiences, I might have had more resiliency. I might have been more resilient to stay there longer and to cope with the negative experiences I was having if I had like the support system of specific people around me. Now, I did make some wonderful friends, some amazing friends. There were people in that area who, you know, showed love and care and concern for me and that I did grow really close to. But again, the magnitude of the racism I was feeling and the colorism and the misogynoir I was feeling was just too great for the few close friends I was able to cultivate to really make up for that gap. Now, the sixth question, I'm particularly excited about it because it's not one that we often hear or think about in these types of videos where we're talking about where to move, where to live. And this question is, do I actually need to leave the city altogether? Or do I just maybe need to move to a different part of the city? Okay. So maybe you don't even need to leave your neighborhood. Maybe your location is perfectly fine. Maybe you just need a better apartment or a better house in your neighborhood. Or again, maybe you love the city or the state that you live in. But if you just move a few miles down the road where you can walk to grocery stores and walk to coffee shops, that could completely change your life. Or you can move a few miles in the opposite direction to get away from the noise of nightclubs. Could completely change your quality of life. So keep in mind that this works at a macro scale, thinking about, okay, what country do I want to live in? But also a micro scale, like I like the city, but what's the right neighborhood in this city? Now, not everyone wants to or can change their physical address. Some people will have to stay in the same house, same apartment that they're in. Some people really want to stay planted. Some people really don't want to relocate, or maybe they're not able to or not in a position to relocate or change their address right now. And if that's your situation, I highly recommend watching this video right here that's popping up on the screen, because I talk about how to upgrade your physical environment without ever changing your physical address. See you in the next video. Take care. Much love.